Thank you so much for coming this morning. I'm going to try and crunch down everything I have to say about interaction design and user experience in 20 minutes, so please let me know if I'm starting to get a bit late. I'm a Swiss interaction designer and technologist. I've been working with immersive technologies for the past 10 years now, so it's been quite a long time. I've worked also with things like robotics, a lot of sensors, facial recognitions, and things like that. And my personal goal has been to make technology more accessible to designers like myself. So I founded a company 3 years ago called apelab, and we're working on democratizing XR content creation on all platforms. We work with companies, but more importantly, what I'm going to talk about today is a platform called SpatialStories that we're currently building. It's in development, and then we'll go over some of my insights on what interaction design and user experience is in XR. So SpatialStories has kind of two things. So there's a series of open tools, which are, as of now, completely free to use and open source. There's different elements to those tools. So we have a Unity plugin dedicated to interaction designers. There's an API for developers, and there's also a standalone virtual reality app where you can build interactions within a headset that we've worked on with HTC over the past 3 months. And that's also under development, but I'll show you a little bit what we've thought of in terms of interface and use cases. And the second part of it is what we call a work platform. So this is something that's going to be launched in October. It's built on top of blockchain, and it's part of the tools. So I'm going to show you just a little bit of a prototype of what that is so you understand. The idea is to connect enterprises with XR creators worldwide and allow them to find jobs and work in the XR space and get paid for that. And so it's going to be available through all the platforms. There's a website here that you can see, and this is all prototypes. I'm just showing you what's going to happen in a few couple of months. And here you have different types of projects. So it ranges from educational to retail and things like that. And you can see on the top right hand, that's the price. That's what you get when you work on those projects. And this is also available directly within Unity. So when you download our SDK, you'll get access to that marketplace directly in Unity, and if you decide to work on a project, you just click on it. You get some of the assets if there are any, and when you're done, you just upload it back, and you get paid for the work that you've done. So this is all really work in progress, but I thought it would be interesting for you guys to see that, and it works on the Ethereum blockchain. So there's smart contracts happening behind it that automate the workflow between the people who create the challenges and the jobs and the creators who are actually building those things. So I'm going to go back now to the presentation and talk a little bit about a user experience. I wanted to make the distinction between two types of applications. It's just a personal thing that I want to do, and this will help us as well talk about the type of users that we are going to focus on. So for me, there's two types of apps. There's the consumer apps where you're going to be maybe you're playing a game, you're playing a story and experience, or it's just a utility app. It's something that your user is just consuming and playing around with. And then on the other side, what I call the creation applications, and that's what we're going to focus on today, is when your user actually needs to build something himself, and he's going to be creating content. He might be creating content for others, but that person is not necessarily a software developer, a designer. It could be someone different. And when you're thinking about user experience with that type of lens, you're going to think differently how you're building your applications. We've seen that over the past 3 days. I think probably everyone has said that during their conferences, but XR is going everywhere. It's going to be implemented in every industry. I'm also very excited to see how fast it's gone, because I've been working on that for a long time, and now everything is converging, and we can actually see real work applications coming out of all of this. But the users are also changing. So if we take that lens, users are going to be maybe teachers, students, they could be workers, they could be the IT department at a big company trying to train their employees, storytellers, doctors, researchers, all that spectrum. And a user like that does not necessarily have notions of, design or engineering or coding. And so when we're building applications that are going to help those people actually create things, then we think of the user a bit differently. I'm not going to have a lot of time to go over any details, so I'm just going to go kind of swoop through everything, and then I'm going to try and work on a little Medium article with a lot more details that could be interesting if you guys want to read it afterwards. Three very simple principle of what you need to think about is that the body becomes the interface. So if the body becomes the interface, you're basically responsible for the senses of your whole body. So you can't really mess around with that too much. When you're building an immersive app, you're using the gaze of your user. You can know where he's walking around. You're playing around with what he's grabbing around, maybe what he's looking at. You might be playing around with his brain now because there's brain-computer interfaces coming in, things like that. And you don't take that lightly. You have to really think about how that body is moving around and how you're using it to interface with your virtual world. And so with that comes the notion of feedback. So feedbacks in design, I could talk about that for about an hour and a half. This is so crucial and so important. If feedbacks aren't well designed, then your user really just doesn't understand anything of what's going on. And it gets complicated because if you have someone who's got two controllers, but maybe he's looking over there at something else, and you've designed a very important feedback that's happening on the controller, and he's not going to see it, and then he's losing the whole information, and then the flow is kind of lost. So you need to think about that, and usually using a combination of like haptics, vibrations, visual cues, and 3D audio cues help, and not have too many feedbacks at the same time either, because you get everybody kind of confused in space and not really understanding what's going on. A third point that I wanted to make is instructions. So it's a bit different than feedbacks. Feedbacks are just reactions to an action. You make sure that whatever action your user is doing, there's going to be an appropriate reaction so he understands he did something right or wrong. And instructions are more there to kind of guide the user through the experience, through the interface, through whatever you're building. Again, I could talk a lot about that, but there's different ways to help guide your user through an experience. It could be audio, like a narrator telling him what to do. It can be text that are displayed on objects. And there's also like what I call affordant instructions. It's when the objects themselves tell you what you can do with them. And that's the ones that I prefer because they're not too invasive. So a quick example, we're working on a sort of magic show game where you're on a stage. And to help the user understand where he's supposed to go, we just put spotlights helping him. Okay, I get it, it's a spotlight, I have to go there. So things like that are really helpful, and it doesn't work only with entertainment, but other types of apps as well. There's also a notion that's really interesting to me is that it's whatever we do, it's not natural to be in a spatially aware environment. We think that it's going to be super easy for users to walk around because it's natural, right? It's 3D, so I can grab things, I can move around, and that's all natural to me and no problem. But when you work with non-gamers and if you have normal people using those applications, you'll see that it's not as natural as you hope it would be. That's also part due to the controllers. I love those controllers personally as a designer. I prefer the Oculus one than the Vive ones. Well, it kind of depends, but it still sticks with a whole bunch of buttons in them. And if you put a normal person with that in their hands, they don't really know what to do with this. There's too many buttons, especially with us who we're working on tools, meaning that there's a lot of interfacing and a lot of buttons, and it gets quickly confusing. But you can kind of go around that and play around with those controllers with something that I like to call suspension of disbelief. So in Magic, suspension of disbelief means that you're kind of ready to be tricked. You know that things don't really work, but it's okay. You don't really care about it. You play and you're happy. And I'm going to give you a quick example of what I mean by that. So if you've all played around with the Wii, there's two controllers on the Wii. On the older Wii, now they have the Switch, which is the controller even better, but they're very simple, and it's just an accelerometer that does the whole trick. But they managed to do simulations where everyone's dancing, everyone's playing football, playing baseball, people are playing tennis, and a whole bunch of different things, when in fact all they could do is just stay on their couch and just wiggle the controller like this, and they actually win. You win a lot better if you go like that. So you don't really need to do any of those things, but no one cares. Who cares? They want to play. And this is something that you can really use when you're working in interactivity and designing in VR and AR, because you have controllers and you can make them disappear as a designer. You can make them completely disappear and still have meaningful interactions. We like to do doodles at the studio, so these are just some of the funny doodles that we do when we try to kind of simplify interactive processes. There's a couple of really good examples in there, like the elevator, super simple, but super effective. We have an adventure game where there's an elevator at one point when you go up on the stage, and everyone just really feels like they're just going up. And it's a very simple principle, but it works, and you don't need too many tricks or complex things to do that. And it's also very precise, because depending on where you put, how you put the walls around the elevator, even off by 1 centimeter, the effect is gone. So it's really a random design thing where just the right amount of being closed up and going up makes the thing completely perfect. Another very simple example, we did a 4-day workshop with students who had no idea about VR and more like graphic designers and illustrators. And they did a little app in VR in the Oculus where it's political speech simulator. So that was kind of interesting, like a dictator speech simulator. Very simple setup. They had 4 days, so that's what they did. There's the speech on the right, which is a very strange speech to read, by the way. And on the left, there's gestures that you have to do at exactly the right time. So depending on what you're saying, you're supposed to do certain gestures, etc. And there's a little like virtual microphone in the middle. And just the little microphone, it's very simple, it's stupid. Just you go in front of the microphone, you start talking, and your voice comes out very loudly out of all the, I don't know how you say that in English, but you get me, those things. And that was simple, but it was great. It was awesome. We just play around only with that. So there's things that you can just play around with and discover them as you have fun with your user. I'm going to go now a little bit. I don't know how much time I have left, so we'll see how much I can cover. 9 minutes. OK, cool. So I just want to go a little bit more in detail of how our tools work, since then you guys can then download them and try them. So this is kind of what the user looks like. If you work in Unity, you usually, when you open Unity, you have a camera, and that's it. And in our plugin, you right-click on the camera, and you convert that camera into an interactive camera, and then you can kind of get an automatic rig like this that gives you easy access to the position of the user. It gives you access to the proximity zone that you can define, the hands, all the inputs, the gaze. We're going to do some prototyping with colleagues of ours at HTC ViveX who are working on BCI, so brain computers. You'll be able to maybe one day use brain interface to work. And these are things that are just really quickly available, and we're making it easy for designers to use them, so then it's a drag and drop interface. And the other principle is what we call an interactive object. So any 3D model, you can put it in and then transform it into an interactive object, whatever model you want. And then there's as well a whole bunch of parameters that you can define. You can define where you can grab it. You can define its zone. You can define also the gaze zone of the object, and a whole bunch of different things that we've implemented. And then it works with a simple condition and action system. So you can have many different conditions, such as I'm looking at you, and I'm doing this gesture, and I'm close to the door, now you jump, things like that. So it's really a condition and action system, and you can do a whole bunch of things with that. And let me see. Here there's a sort of list of the actions and conditions that we've already built in, but it's a bit like a Lego, so you can add your own, you can code your own actions, you can code your own conditions, and just augment the tool set as you like. With the time that I have left, I wanted to show you a little bit of the prototype of the standalone app that we've been building, and show you a little bit what we've been thinking in terms of interface. It's not finished yet, it's work in progress. It's also going to be open source, so anyone will be able to build other VR apps with it, or use the interface, or just take bits of it and then build their own thing. So let me show you. This is still pretty early, but so on the right hand, we're using the right hand for selecting different modes. It's quite a hectic project because there's so many interfaces that we have to put in. And on the left hand, you just have the menu that allows you to do different things, like create is to model things, there's interactions. And then we've thought of a play mode, which is very simple to kind of go through. So when you're working live, you can go from play mode to edit mode in just a click, and the app really registers what you've been doing, and then you can move around by just sort of crawling like you're in a swimming pool for now. It's not the best, by the way, but it'll get there. This is an example of me working on my beautiful apartment app, visiting apartment app. So I can edit the furniture, and then I can go into play mode and walk around, see what the lighting looks like, teleport around, which is not what I would recommend for every app, but for now that's what we have. So you can kind of really see what you're designing. So these are all models that were made by a designer, and then you just place things around. Then I want to change the lighting because I don't like the lighting. So I'm just going to go there, go into edit mode. Those gloves mean absolutely nothing. So just edit the lighting, go back in play mode, see what that looks like, and really try to make things as natural as possible. And then the last video is me trying to build a little adventure game that's very short. So there's we have a partnership with Sketchfab. So all these assets are just assets found on Sketchfab and put inside the app, and then we're trying to make things interactive. Some of them have built-in animations, so it's practical. You can play around with that. There's a key card on the right-hand side, and there's sort of a panel on the left, and the goal is set up so that when the user takes the key card, puts it on the panel, the robot wakes up, and then if you throw a juice box at him, he falls. Okay, why not? So I don't know if it's going to be very clear, but at least it's a use case. So here there's the key card, so you can press on the model, decide that, yes, I want it to have gravity. I want it to be grabbable, okay. Pretty easy. Same with the juice box thing. Okay. What else am I going to do? So adding a first interaction. It's really hard when you're doing framing so that you guys can see something is difficult. So yeah, and you see that on the right hand, we're really using it for all the different types of tools. So I think I added an interaction there. I'm going to use the proximity condition. So it's going to be the proximity between the key card and that panel thingy. Come on. Okay, and then the action is going to be the robot waking up. So you select an object, and you decide which animation you want to launch. So it's really like an open, you can select any objects and add conditions and actions to any objects in the space. And I'm going to do the second interaction. So add a new interaction here. Select the juice box. Takes a bit of time. I wanted to do this live, but then I thought it would be really too complicated, and then you wouldn't see me talking, which is a bit annoying. And so here I'm saying that when the juice box is colliding with the robot, he falls. Launching his animation. See, I have issues with the controllers at that moment. I'm like, what? It's not working. Okay. Now play, and you'll see that it works. So there you go. I have the key card. I press it there, he wakes up, and then if I launch that juice box on his face, he falls. Okay, so that's really the overall idea of the thing. Thank you. Perfect. I only have a couple of, so I'm going to go through these slides very quickly. I just wanted to show you a little bit that trying to build an interface for people who don't know how to code is super complicated, and it's hard to make simple. And so these are just like storyboards. There's a giant case of those, but I thought it was kind of fun to see that we actually work with storyboards, and we do also a lot of those like workflow design, because you have two controllers, and you always need to know, like, if the user selected that button, then this happens on the left hand, this happens on the right hand, this is what happens on the object. So it gets a lot more complicated in terms of, if you're an interface designer, this is kind of hectic, and it gives you a brain damage kind of thing after a moment. But it's very, and we even started using storytelling tools like Twine to help us build the interaction workflow. So we actually have a story where it says, oh, the user presses on that button, and if he does this and that, click here, like a little adventure game. I don't have it here, but it's very funny to read. And yeah, this kind of like really mocking up how a user is going to do things. And we used sushi cats for all the mockups. So all of our slides have sushi cats because they're really cool. And that one particularly is super nice. I'm actually done, but I just wanted to also show you this. Is a very simple thing that we've put together for interface designers. There's so many interfaces that need to be built in that we've built a little XML system so that a normal person can actually decide exactly what the panel is going to look like. And that's something that's also going to be put open source, so you can use it if you want. If you're building your own interfaces, it's super easy. It just helps you kind of place, it helps the designers place the buttons where they should be in their functionalities without having to code anything. They just go into a little XML and place things around like that. I am done. So thank you so much for listening. I'm going to be around. I'm the XR illusionist on Twitter, and if you want to grab some of the tools, just go on SpatialStories.net. So the plugin beta is available now, and the rest is coming as soon as we can. There's 4 of us, so we're slow, but we are doing cool stuff. So thank you.